They kicked me out with nothing. 3 years later, they couldn't believe their eyes. Maya Bennett stood in the doorway of her childhood bedroom with a single duffel bag in her hand. That was all she was allowed to take. One bag for 18 years of living in that house. "You have 20 minutes," her stepfather Richard said. He was standing in the hallway with his arms crossed, watching her like she was a stranger who had broken into his home. In a way, that's exactly how he saw her. "Dad, please," Maya said, even though he was not her real father. She had called him Dad for 10 years because her mother asked her to, because it made things easier, because she thought if she was kind enough, if she was good enough, maybe he would love her the way he loved his own children. She was wrong. "Don't call me that," Richard said. His voice was flat and cold, like he was talking to someone he had never met. "You're 22 years old. It's time you learned to take care of yourself." Maya looked past him, down the hallway, hoping to see her mother. Hoping her mother would run out of the bedroom and say, "Wait, stop, this isn't right." But the hallway was empty. Her mother was in the bedroom with the door closed, and Maya knew she wasn't coming out. "Where's Mom?" Maya asked, even though she already knew the answer. "Your mother agrees with me," Richard said. "This house is for family. You made your choice when you decided to embarrass us at Chloe's engagement party." Maya felt her chest tighten. It wasn't fair. All she had done at that party was ask a simple question. She had asked why the trust fund her biological father left her, the one meant for her college and her future, had been used instead to pay for her stepsister Chloe's new car and her upcoming wedding. She hadn't even meant to ask it in front of everyone. It had just slipped out after Richard's mother made a comment about how some children don't appreciate what they're given. Something in Maya broke that night. 22 years of swallowing her feelings, 22 years of being told to be grateful, to be quiet, to not cause trouble, all of it came out in one sentence. And that one sentence was enough for Richard to decide she no longer belonged in his house. "I have proof," Maya said quietly. "I have the papers. My father set that money aside for me before he died. It wasn't yours to give to Chloe." "Your father is dead," Richard said, his voice sharp now. "And in this house, I make the decisions. Chloe is my daughter. You were a guest here, a guest who overstayed her welcome." Those words cut deeper than anything else he had ever said. A guest. Not a daughter, not family. A guest. Maya didn't argue anymore. She packed her bag, some clothes, her laptop, a photo of her real father, and the folder with the trust documents she had found hidden in her mother's desk 2 weeks earlier. She had been planning to talk to a lawyer about it quietly, without causing a scene. But now there was no reason to be quiet anymore. As she walked down the stairs, she saw her stepsister Chloe sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone like nothing important was happening. Chloe glanced up and smirked. "Bye, Maya," Chloe said. "Try not to end up on the street." Maya didn't answer. She walked out the front door into the cold October night, and it closed behind her with a soft click that felt louder than any slamming door could have been. She stood on the sidewalk for a moment, looking back at the house she had lived in for 10 years. The porch light was on, the windows glowed warm and yellow, but none of that warmth was for her anymore. She had $340 in her bank account, a duffel bag of clothes, a laptop, and a folder of papers she didn't fully understand yet. She had no job lined up, no apartment, and no family who wanted her. But she also had something else, something Richard didn't know about, something that would matter more than he could ever imagine. She had a plan. That first night, Maya slept in her car. It was a used Honda Civic that her real father had left her when he passed away, along with the trust fund that Richard had stolen from her. It wasn't much, but at least she had somewhere to sleep that wasn't the cold street. The next morning, she woke up stiff and cold, her neck aching from sleeping in an awkward position. She looked at herself in the rearview mirror. Her eyes were red from crying the night before, but there was something else in her expression too. Something hard, something determined. "Okay," she whispered to herself. "Okay, Maya, what now?" She drove to a coffee shop, used their bathroom to wash her face, and used their Wi-Fi to search for jobs. She had graduated from college 2 years earlier with a degree in business, but she had never used it because Richard insisted she work at his company, doing basic administrative tasks, saying it would help her learn the family business. even though everyone knew that job would never actually go to her. It would go to Chloe, or to Richard's biological son, Tyler, who lived 2 states away and rarely visited. Maya realized, sitting in that coffee shop with her cold latte and her half-charged laptop, that she had spent years preparing for a future that was never going to include her. She had wasted so much time trying to earn love from people who had already decided she didn't deserve it. That realization hurt, but it also set her free. She applied to 20 jobs that first day. She got 2 callbacks by the end of the week. One was for a receptionist position at a small accounting firm. The other was for an entry-level analyst position at a growing tech startup called Nexlify, which specialized in software for small businesses. She took the analyst position. It paid less at first, but she believed it had more room to grow. For the first month, Maya lived out of her car and showered at a nearby gym using a cheap membership she signed up for. She kept her situation a secret from her coworkers. She wore the same 3 outfits on rotation, washing them at a laundromat every Sunday. She ate cheap food, rice, eggs, canned beans, and saved every dollar she could. It was humiliating in some ways. She had grown up in a big house with a pool and a home theater room, and now she was living in a Honda Civic in a Walmart parking lot. But there was also something clarifying about it. Nobody was watching her. Nobody was judging her decisions. For the first time in years, she was completely in control of her own life. At Nexlify, Maya worked harder than anyone else on her team. She stayed late. She asked questions. She read books about business strategy on her lunch break. Her manager, a woman named Diane Foster, noticed quickly. "You've got something special," Diane told her one afternoon, about 2 months into the job. "Most new hires take 6 months to understand our client systems as well as you already do." "Thank you," Maya said. I don't have anything else to focus on right now. Work is all I have." Diane looked at her carefully. She could tell there was more to that sentence than Maya was saying, but she didn't push. "Well, keep it up," Diane said. "I think you could go far here." Those words meant more to Maya than Diane probably realized. Nobody in her family had ever told her she could go far. Nobody had ever believed in her potential. It had always been about Chloe's potential, Tyler's potential, everyone's potential except hers. By the 3rd month, Maya had saved enough money to rent a small studio apartment. It was tiny, barely 300 square feet, with a bed that folded into the wall and a kitchen that was really just a counter with a hot plate. But it was hers. She didn't have to share it with anyone who resented her presence. She hung the photo of her father on the wall above her bed. In the photo, he was smiling, holding a much younger Maya on his shoulders at a beach somewhere. She didn't remember the day the photo was taken. She had been too young, but she remembered his laugh from other memories. Warm and full, nothing like Richard's cold, controlled tone. "I'm going to make this right, Dad," she whispered to the photo most nights before falling asleep. "I promise." About 4 months after she moved into her apartment, Maya finally had a free weekend to sit down and go through the folder of documents she had taken from her mother's desk. She had been putting it off, partly out of fear, and partly because she had been too exhausted from work to deal with anything else. She spread the papers across her small kitchen table. There were bank statements, trust fund documents, and letters from a lawyer named Gerald Whitfield, who had apparently helped her father set up the trust before he died. As she read through everything, a picture began to form. Her father, David Bennett, had been a successful architect. When Maya was 6 years old, he was diagnosed with an aggressive form of cancer. Knowing he wouldn't survive much longer, he set up a trust fund for Maya worth $180,000, meant to be given to her when she turned 18, to help with college and starting her adult life. But he had also set up something else, something Maya hadn't known about until now. He owned a 15% stake in a small architecture firm called Bennett & Cole Associates, a company he had co-founded with his business partner, Marcus Cole, before Maya was born. That ownership stake was also supposed to transfer to Maya when she turned 18, according to a separate document dated just 2 months before her father passed away. Maya's hands were shaking as she read through the papers. If this was real, if this ownership stake had never been properly transferred to her, then she might legally own a piece of a company she had never even heard of. She looked up the company online. Bennett and Cole Associates was still operating, now under the name Cole Architecture Group. It appeared Marcus Cole had bought out or absorbed her father's share after his death, likely believing there was no one left to claim it, or perhaps her mother, grieving, overwhelmed, and later remarried to Richard, had simply never followed up on it. Maya spent the next several nights researching everything she could about trust law, business ownership transfers, and her rights as a beneficiary. She learned that because she was a minor when her father died, and because her mother had remarried and, according to the documents, had access to and apparent control over Maya's trust before Maya turned 18, there was a real possibility that the ownership transfer had been mishandled, whether through neglect or intentional interference. She decided to call the lawyer who had drafted the original documents, Gerald Whitfield. It took her 3 days to track down his current office, since he had moved firms since her father's death. "Maya Bennett," Gerald said when she finally got him on the phone. His voice sounded surprised, almost emotional. "I never thought I'd hear from you. I tried to reach your mother several times over the years, but she never returned my calls. I need to know what happened to my father's ownership stake in Bennett and Cole," Maya said. "I found documents suggesting it was supposed to come to me." There was a pause on the line. "Can you come into my office? This isn't something I want to discuss over the phone." 2 days later, Maya sat across from Gerald Whitfield in his small but tidy office. He was an older man, maybe in his late 60s, with kind eyes and a gentle way of speaking. "Your father was one of the most thoughtful clients I ever worked with," Gerald said, pulling out a thick file. "He knew he was dying, and he wanted to make sure you were taken care of, no matter what happened with your mother's future relationships. He was worried, even back then, that if she remarried, a new husband might not have your best interests at heart." Maya felt tears forming in her eyes. Her father had seen this coming. Years before it happened, he had tried to protect her. "The 15% ownership stake in Bennett and Cole Associates was legally yours the day you turned 18, Gerald continued. "According to my records, that transfer was never properly executed. Someone would have needed to file paperwork with the state and notify the company. If that never happened, then the company might still owe it to me," Maya finished. "Potentially, yes, along with 4 years of dividends and profit shares you should have received, if the company was profitable during that time," Gerald said. "This could be a significant amount of money, Maya, and more than that, it could mean you have a legal claim to real ownership in that company." Maya sat back in her chair, her mind spinning. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about her father's legacy. This was about something he had built and wanted to give to her, something Richard and her mother had let slip away, or worse, had known about and hidden from her on purpose. "I want to pursue this," Maya said firmly. "I want to know the truth, and I want what's mine." Gerald smiled for the first time since she had walked in. "Your father would be proud of you for asking. Let's get to work." The legal process was slow. Gerald warned her it could take a year or more to sort out, especially if Marcus Cole or her mother's side of the family decided to fight it. Maya understood that she needed to be patient, and in the meantime, she needed to keep building her own life, independent of whatever happened with the lawsuit. She threw herself even further into her work at Nexlify. Diane continued to mentor her, giving her more responsibility with each passing month. By her first anniversary at the company, Maya had been promoted from analyst to senior analyst, and she was leading a small team on a project to help redesign the company's client onboarding system. It was during this project that Maya had an idea that would change everything. She noticed that many of Nexlify's small business clients struggled with the same problem. They didn't have a simple way to track cash flow and predict financial trouble before it happened. Existing software was either too complicated for small business owners or too basic to actually be useful. Maya spent her evenings and weekends, the little free time she had, sketching out an idea for a simplified financial forecasting tool designed specifically for small businesses with fewer than 20 employees. She taught herself basic coding through online courses, staying up late after work to build a simple prototype. She showed it to Diane first. "This is really good, Maya," Diane said, looking through the prototype on her laptop. "This could genuinely help people. Have you thought about pitching this internally, as a new product line for Nexlify?" Maya had thought about it, but something held her back. She had spent her whole life building things, grades, relationships, effort, only to have them taken away or given to someone else. She didn't want this idea to become another thing that was taken from her. "I've thought about doing it on my own," Maya admitted. "Starting my own company, I mean." Diane studied her for a long moment. "That's a big risk, but if you believe in it enough, it might be worth taking." That conversation stayed with Maya for weeks. She continued perfecting her prototype at night, testing it with a few small business owners she found through online forums, people willing to give feedback in exchange for early access. The feedback was overwhelmingly positive. People said it was the first financial tool that actually made sense to them. 8 months after she started building it, and about a year and a half after she had been kicked out of her stepfather's house, Maya made the difficult decision to leave Nexlify and pursue her own company full-time. Diane was sad to see her go, but was also one of her biggest supporters. "If this doesn't work out, there will always be a place for you here," Diane told her on her last day. "But I don't think you're going to need it." Maya used what remained of her savings, plus a small loan from a startup incubator program she had been accepted into after a rigorous application process, to officially launch her company. She named it Anchor Finance because she wanted it to represent stability, something she had never really had growing up. The first year of running her own company was the hardest thing Maya had ever done. She worked 80-hour weeks. She lived off ramen noodles and coffee. She dealt with technical problems, marketing challenges, and the constant fear that everything could fall apart at any moment. There were nights she cried from exhaustion, wondering if she had made a terrible mistake. But slowly, Anchor Finance began to grow. Word spread among small business owners. A feature in a regional business magazine brought in a wave of new users. By the end of the first year, Anchor Finance had over 3,000 paying customers and had brought on 2 additional employees to help manage the growing workload. Throughout all of this, Maya's lawsuit regarding her father's company ownership was slowly moving forward in the background. Marcus Cole had initially denied any wrongdoing, claiming the ownership stake had been informally settled years earlier, but Gerald had found records proving otherwise. The case was heading toward a settlement. Maya had not spoken to her mother, Richard, or Chloe in over 2 years. She had blocked their numbers shortly after leaving that October night, needing space to heal and rebuild without their voices in her head telling her she wasn't good enough. She occasionally saw things about them through mutual old friends or social media, glimpses she couldn't always avoid. She heard that Chloe's wedding, the one that had used up part of Maya's trust fund, had been extravagant and widely talked about in their small community. She heard that Richard's business had been struggling due to some poor investment decisions. She tried not to feel anything about any of it, good or bad. She was too busy building her own future to spend energy on their present. 2.5 years after Maya was kicked out of her family's home, Gerald Whitfield called her with news. "We reached a settlement," he said. "Marcus Cole has agreed to buy out your 15% stake at current market value, plus back pay the dividends you were owed over the past several years, adjusted for interest. It's not a small number, Maya." "How much?" Maya asked, her heart pounding. "After legal fees, you're looking at approximately $1.2 million. Maya nearly dropped her phone. She sat down slowly on her small couch, the same couch she had bought secondhand when she first moved into her studio apartment, back when she had nothing. "I don't know what to say," Maya whispered. "Your father would be incredibly proud of you," Gerald said. "Not just for winning this case, but for everything you've built on your own along the way. I've been following the news about Anchor Finance. You didn't need this settlement to succeed. You already proved that to yourself." Those words stuck with Maya for a long time. He was right. The money mattered. Of course, it would allow her to expand Anchor Finance significantly, hire more employees, and finally pay herself a real salary instead of barely scraping by. But more than the money, what mattered was that she had built something real, something entirely her own, without anyone's help or permission. With the settlement money, Maya was able to move Anchor Finance into a proper office space, hire 15 new employees, and significantly expand the software's capabilities. Within another year, the company had grown to serve over 20,000 small businesses across the country. a larger fintech company approached her about a potential partnership, which eventually led to a significant investment that valued Anchor Finance at over $8 million. Maya Bennett, the girl who had been thrown out of her home with nothing but a duffel bag, had built a company worth millions, all before her 26th birthday. But throughout all of her success, there was still an emptiness inside her. She thought about her mother sometimes, late at night when the office was quiet and she was the last one left working. She wondered if her mother ever regretted what happened. She wondered if Richard ever thought about the daughter he had thrown away like she meant nothing. She decided she wasn't ready to reach out, not yet, but she also decided she wasn't going to hide anymore either. If they ever found out what had happened to her, they would find out the truth, not a version softened to make them feel better. It was almost exactly 3 years after that cold October night when Maya's life intersected with her old family again, though not in the way she expected. Anchor Finance had grown enough that Maya was regularly invited to speak at business conferences and local economic development events. She had become something of a local success story, a young entrepreneur who built a thriving company from nothing. Reporters had written articles about her journey, though she had always kept the details about her family vague, simply saying she had faced significant personal challenges before starting her business. One Thursday evening, Maya was invited to speak at a regional Chamber of Commerce dinner, an event honoring successful local business leaders. She almost declined the invitation. Public speaking always made her nervous, even after doing it dozens of times. But her business partner convinced her it would be good exposure for the company. She arrived at the elegant hotel ballroom, wearing a simple but sharp navy blue dress, her hair pulled back neatly, a confidence in her posture that had taken years to build. She barely recognized herself when she caught her reflection in the hotel's tall mirrors. The girl who once slept in a Honda Civic was now about to be honored as one of the region's top 30 entrepreneurs under 30. As she made her way through the crowd, greeting other business owners and local officials, she suddenly froze. Standing near the bar, in a group of other guests, was Richard. He looked older than she remembered. His hair had more gray in it, and there were deep lines around his eyes that hadn't been there 3 years ago. He was talking to another man, gesturing with his hands the way he always did when trying to impress someone. Maya's first instinct was to turn around and leave. Her heart was pounding, and her palms felt suddenly damp. But then she remembered something Gerald had told her months ago. You don't owe anyone an explanation for your success, and you don't owe anyone the comfort of avoiding you either. She took a deep breath and continued through the room, choosing not to approach him, but also refusing to hide. It wasn't until the formal part of the evening began that things became truly unavoidable. Maya was seated at the head table, since she was one of the evening's honorees. As the MC began announcing the award recipients and their accomplishments, Maya scanned the crowd and realized, with a jolt, that Richard was seated at a table not too far from the stage. He appeared to be there as a guest of one of the event's corporate sponsors, likely a business contact of his. Our next honoree, the MC announced, built her company from absolutely nothing. She started with a single laptop and an idea, and in just 3 years, she's built Anchor Finance into a company serving over 20,000 small businesses nationwide, with a current valuation exceeding $8 million. Please welcome Maya Bennett, founder and CEO of Anchor Finance. Henquate. The room erupted into applause. Maya stood, smoothing down her dress, and walked toward the podium. As she passed near Richard's table, she saw the exact moment recognition hit him. His face went pale. His mouth opened slightly, like he wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. The other people at his table were clapping enthusiastically, completely unaware of the history between him and the woman walking past them. Maya didn't stop. She didn't acknowledge him. She simply continued walking to the stage, her chin held high, and stepped up to the podium. She looked out at the crowd, took a deep breath, and began to speak. 3 years ago, she said, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside her, I had nothing. I had $340 in my bank account, a car that became my temporary home, and absolutely no idea how I was going to survive the next week, let alone build a future. The room went quiet, the atmosphere shifting from polite applause to genuine attention. I was told, by people who were supposed to love and protect me, that I wasn't really family, That I was, in their words, a guest who had overstayed her welcome, Maya continued, her eyes briefly flicking toward Richard's table, though she didn't linger there. I want to say to anyone in this room who has ever been told they aren't enough, that those words don't have to define you. They didn't define me. She spoke about the months of sleeping in her car, the humiliation and fear, the moments she almost gave up. She spoke about finding a job that believed in her potential, about teaching herself to code late at night, about the fear of leaving a stable job to chase an uncertain dream. She spoke about resilience, about proving to herself that her worth was never tied to anyone else's approval. She did not mention Richard's name. She did not need to. Anyone paying close attention could see the way his face had drained of color, the way he stared down at the table instead of looking at the stage. When Maya finished speaking, the room rose into a standing ovation. She smiled, thanked everyone, and made her way back to her seat, her hands trembling slightly now that the adrenaline was fading. After the formal program ended, Maya found herself surrounded by other guests wanting to congratulate her, exchange business cards, and ask questions about her company. She was gracious with all of them, though part of her mind kept drifting to the fact that Richard was still somewhere in the room. It was nearly an hour later, as the crowd began to thin, that she finally saw him approaching her. He looked nervous, his hands fidgeting at his sides, nothing like the cold, controlled man who had told her to pack her things 3 years earlier. "Maya," he said, his voice quieter than she remembered. "Can we talk?" Maya considered walking away. She had every right to. But something inside her, perhaps curiosity, perhaps the need for closure, made her nod. 5 minutes, she said, leading him to a quieter corner of the ballroom. "I had no idea," Richard began, "about any of this. I didn't know you had built all of this." "Would it have mattered if you did?" Maya asked, her voice calm but firm. Richard opened his mouth, then closed it again. "I don't know," he admitted finally. "I'd like to say yes, but honestly, I don't know." "At least you're being honest now," Maya said. "That's more than you were 3 years ago." Richard rubbed his face with his hands, looking older and more tired than Maya had ever seen him. "Things have been difficult since you left. Your mother, she hasn't been the same. She misses you, Maya. She talks about you constantly, but she's too afraid and too ashamed to reach out." Maya felt her chest tighten at the mention of her mother, but she kept her expression steady. "She had my number for 3 years. She knew where I worked. If she wanted to reach out, she could have." "I know," Richard said quietly. "I know that's not an excuse. I made things very difficult between you two. I said things I shouldn't have said, and I did things I shouldn't have done." "You stole from me," Maya said bluntly, finally saying the words directly to his face. "You took money that wasn't yours and gave it to Chloe. And you knew about my father's company shares too, didn't you? You knew there was more, and you let it slip away, or you made sure it slipped away, because it was easier than having to explain it to me." Richard's face flushed. "I didn't know about the company shares. I swear to you, I didn't know about that part." Maya studied his face for a long moment, trying to determine if he was telling the truth. She realized, ultimately, that it didn't matter anymore. Whether he had known or not, the outcome for her had been the same. She had been left with nothing, forced to build her entire life from the ground up, alone. "I got the settlement," Maya said. "From Marcus Cole. I know about the trust fund, and I know about the ownership stake my father left me. Everything that should have been mine years ago." Richard's eyes widened slightly, but he didn't argue or try to defend himself further. "I'm not doing this to make you feel guilty," Maya continued. "I'm telling you because I want you to understand something. You didn't break me when you kicked me out. You made me stronger. Every single day I struggled. Every night I went to bed hungry or scared. It built something in me that you and Chloe and even my own mother never had to build, because you always had a safety net. I never had that. I had to become my own safety net." Richard was quiet for a long moment. "I'm sorry, Maya. I know it doesn't fix anything, but I am truly sorry." "I believe that you're sorry," Maya said, "but I don't think you're sorry for what you did to me. I think you're sorry because you're seeing the person I became, and you're realizing what you almost destroyed. Those are two very different things." She turned to leave, but Richard called after her one more time. Your mother would love to see you, even just once. Maya paused, her back still turned to him. Tell her she knows how to reach me. If she wants to see me, she can call, but I'm not going to chase after people who were willing to let me disappear. She walked away without looking back, her heels clicking steadily against the marble floor, her posture straight and confident. For the first time in 3 years, she felt like the conversation she had been dreading for so long was finally, truly over. 2 weeks after the Chamber of Commerce dinner, Maya's phone rang with a number she hadn't seen in 3 years, her mother's number. She stared at the screen for a long moment, her heart racing, before finally deciding to answer. Hello, Maya said, her voice carefully neutral. Maya, her mother's voice came through, thick with emotion, barely holding together. Maya, sweetheart, it's Mom. Maya closed her eyes, feeling a rush of emotions she had spent 3 years trying to bury. Anger, hurt, but also, despite everything, a flicker of longing for the mother she used to know before Richard came into their lives. I heard about your company, her mother continued, when Maya didn't respond right away. Richard told me about the event, about everything you said. I've been crying for 2 weeks, Maya. I am so sorry. I should have stopped him. I should have fought for you. Why didn't you? Maya asked, her voice quiet but steady. There was a long pause on the line. I was scared, her mother finally admitted. Richard could be difficult when he didn't get his way. I was afraid of losing my marriage, afraid of being alone again after your father died. I told myself you were strong enough to handle it, that you would be fine. I told myself a lot of things to make myself feel less guilty. None of it was fair to you. Maya felt tears sliding down her cheeks, though her voice remained steady. I needed my mother. Not perfect. Not someone who always made the right choices. I just needed you to choose me, even once when it mattered most. I know, her mother said, crying harder now. I know, and I will spend the rest of my life regretting that I didn't. Please, Maya, is there any way we could meet? Just to talk? I'm not asking you to forgive me. I just want a chance to see you, to know you're okay. Maya sat with the request for a long moment, staring at the photo of her father on her office wall. She had moved it there when Anchor Finance got its own space. She thought about everything she had been through, everything she had built, and she realized that her strength no longer depended on whether or not she reconciled with her mother. She had already proven, to herself and to the world, that she didn't need anyone's approval to be whole. I'll meet you, Maya said finally. Just you. Not Richard, not Chloe. Just us. And I'm not promising anything beyond that first conversation. Thank you, her mother whispered. Thank you, Maya. That's more than I deserve. They agreed to meet the following weekend at a small cafe, neutral ground for both of them. The cafe was quiet on Saturday morning when Maya arrived, 10 minutes early, as she always was for everything. She chose a table near the window, ordered a coffee, and waited, her hands wrapped around the warm cup for comfort. Her mother arrived a few minutes later. She looked smaller than Maya remembered, thinner, with more gray hair than the last time they had been in the same room together. When their eyes met, her mother's face crumpled, and she had to take a moment before approaching the table. You look beautiful, her mother said as she sat down. You look so much like your father. Thank you, Maya said simply. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of 3 years of separation heavy between them. I don't know where to start, her mother admitted. Start with the truth, Maya said. That's all I've ever wanted from you. Her mother nodded, wiping at her eyes with a napkin. After your father died, I was completely lost. I didn't know how to be a single mother, how to run a household, how to manage money, or make big decisions on my own. When I met Richard, he seemed so stable, so sure of himself. I convinced myself that marrying him was the responsible thing to do, for both of us. But you let him control everything, Maya said, including how he treated me. I know, her mother said, her voice breaking. I told myself it was just his personality, that he loved us in his own way, that things would get better with time. But things never got better. He always favored Chloe, and I let it happen because I was too afraid to rock the boat. I convinced myself you were resilient enough to handle being treated like an afterthought. That was wrong of me. So incredibly wrong. Maya listened, feeling a complicated mixture of validation and lingering hurt. Hearing her mother finally acknowledge the truth was healing in some ways, but it also confirmed everything Maya had suspected for years, that her mother had known and had chosen comfort over protecting her daughter. "Did you know about Dad's company shares?" Maya asked. "The ones that were supposed to come to me?" Her mother's face went pale. I found some paperwork years ago, but I didn't fully understand what it meant. Richard told me it wasn't important, that your father's business partner had already handled everything fairly. I believed him because it was easier than digging deeper. "It wasn't handled fairly," Maya said. "I had to hire a lawyer and fight for over 2 years to get what was rightfully mine. Do you understand how different my life could have been if I had known about that money when I turned 18? I might not have had to sleep in my car for 6 months. I might not have had to work 80-hour weeks just to survive." Her mother broke down crying at the table, drawing a few concerned glances from other cafe patrons. "I'm so sorry, Maya. I failed you as a mother. I know saying sorry doesn't undo any of it, but I am sorry, from the very bottom of my heart." Maya reached across the table, hesitating only briefly, before placing her hand over her mother's trembling one. "I'm not here to make you feel worse than you already do. I'm here because some part of me still loves you, even after everything. But I need you to understand that things can't go back to how they were. I've built a life that doesn't depend on you or Richard or Chloe. If we're going to have any kind of relationship moving forward, it has to be honest, and it has to be on my terms." Her mother nodded quickly, gripping Maya's hand like a lifeline. "Whatever terms you need, I just want a chance to be in your life again, even in a small way." They talked for almost 2 hours that morning, slowly working through years of pain, misunderstanding, and buried resentment. It wasn't a perfect reconciliation. Maya made it clear that trust would have to be rebuilt slowly, and that she wasn't ready to have any relationship with Richard or Chloe at all. But it was a start, a small opening in a door that had been slammed shut 3 years earlier. Over the following months, Maya and her mother slowly began rebuilding their relationship. They started with weekly phone calls, then occasional lunches, always without Richard or Chloe present. Maya's mother eventually admitted that her marriage to Richard had been struggling for years, long before Maya ever left, and that she had been considering separating from him regardless of what had happened between him and Maya. 6 months after their first meeting at the cafe, Maya's mother finally filed for divorce from Richard. She moved into a small apartment of her own, taking a part-time job at a local bookstore, something she said made her feel independent for the first time in years. "I should have left him a long time ago," she told Maya during one of their regular dinners, "but I think part of me knew that if I left him, I would have to face how badly I failed you. It was easier to stay and pretend everything was fine." Maya appreciated her mother's honesty, even when it was difficult to hear. Slowly, carefully, they began forming a new relationship, one built on truth, rather than the comfortable silence that had defined their family for so many years. As for Richard, Maya heard through her mother that his business had continued struggling, and that his relationship with Chloe had grown strained after Chloe moved across the country with her husband and rarely visited or called. It seemed that the family Richard had prioritized above Maya hadn't turned out to be the loyal, loving unit he had imagined it would be. Maya felt no satisfaction in his struggles. She had moved past the anger that once consumed her, replacing it with a quiet peace that came from knowing she had built something entirely her own, something no one could take away from her the way they had taken things before. Anchor Finance continued to grow steadily. By the end of that year, the company had expanded to serve over 50,000 small businesses nationwide, and Maya had been featured in several national business publications as one of the most promising young entrepreneurs in the fintech industry. She used part of her success to start a small scholarship fund for young people who had experienced family estrangement or housing instability, wanting to help others avoid the terrifying uncertainty she had faced during those first difficult months on her own. She named the scholarship fund after her father, the David Bennett Foundation for New Beginnings. Nearly 4 years after that cold October night, when Maya was told to pack her things and leave, she stood on a stage again, this time at the opening ceremony for the first group of scholarship recipients from the David Bennett Foundation. She looked out at the young faces in the audience, 18 and 19-year-olds who had experienced their own versions of being abandoned by family, being told they weren't wanted, being left to figure out survival on their own far too young. "I know some of you are scared right now," Maya said into the microphone, her voice warm and steady. "I know some of you feel like the people who were supposed to protect you have let you down in ways that feel impossible to overcome. I want you to know something I wish someone had told me 4 years ago. The people who fail to see your worth do not get to define your worth. You get to define that through every hard choice you make, every time you refuse to give up, every small step forward even when it feels impossible." She thought about that first night in her car, cold and frightened, with no idea how she would survive the coming months. She thought about Diane's early encouragement, about the late nights teaching herself to code, about Gerald Whitfield's kindness in helping her reclaim what was rightfully hers. She thought about her mother's tearful apology, about the slow, imperfect process of rebuilding trust. She had come so far from that scared 22-year-old with a duffel bag and $340 to her name. She had built a company worth millions, reclaimed her father's legacy, and found a way to forgive without forgetting, to move forward without pretending the pain hadn't happened. After the ceremony, as she shook hands with scholarship recipients and their families, a young woman approached her, no older than 19, her eyes red from crying. "Thank you," the young woman said. "My family kicked me out 6 months ago because I wanted to pursue art instead of what they wanted for me. I've been struggling so much, and hearing your story today, it gives me hope that things can get better." Maya smiled, remembering herself at that age, in that exact position, terrified and uncertain about the future. "It will get better," Maya told her. "It won't be easy, and there will be days you want to give up. But you are capable of so much more than the people who hurt you ever gave you credit for. Prove it to yourself, not to them." As the young woman walked away, wiping tears from her eyes but standing a little taller than before, Maya felt a deep sense of peace settle over her. She thought about Richard's cold voice that October night, telling her she was just a guest who had overstayed her welcome. She thought about how those words had once felt like the end of everything she knew. They hadn't been the end, they had been the beginning. Maya Bennett had been kicked out with nothing. 3 years later, she had built everything. A thriving company, a rebuilt relationship with her mother, a foundation helping others facing similar struggles, and most importantly, an unshakable belief in her own worth that no one could ever take away from her again. She looked up at the sky as she walked to her car that evening, the same sky she had stared at through her windshield during those long, uncertain nights 4 years earlier. She smiled, thinking of her father, hoping he was proud of the woman she had become. "We did it, Dad," she whispered into the evening air. "We really did it." And as she drove home to the life she had built entirely with her own hands, Maya Bennett finally, truly, felt like she was home. 5 years after that October night, Maya stood in the kitchen of a beautiful but modest house she had purchased the year before, watching the sun rise through the window above her sink. Anchor Finance had grown into a company valued at over $20 million, serving businesses across the entire country. She had a small, dedicated team who felt more like family to her than blood relatives ever had. Her relationship with her mother had continued to heal, slow and steady, built on honesty rather than the pretending that had once defined their family. They spoke every week, had dinner together every month, and her mother had become one of her biggest supporters, even joining the board of the David Bennett Foundation to help oversee its growing scholarship program. Maya had never fully reconciled with Richard or Chloe, and she had made peace with that. Some relationships, she had learned, could not be repaired, no matter how much time passed. And that was okay. She no longer needed their approval or their presence in her life to feel whole. She thought often about that scared young woman who had packed a single duffel bag and walked out into the cold October night, uncertain if she would survive the coming weeks, let alone build the life she now lived. She was grateful to that younger version of herself, for her resilience, her stubbornness, her refusal to give up even when everything felt impossible. The people who had told her she wasn't enough, who had thrown her away like she meant nothing, could never have imagined the woman she would become. And that, Maya realized, standing in her sunlit kitchen 5 years later, surrounded by a life built entirely on her own strength and determination, was the sweetest kind of justice there was. She hadn't just survived being kicked out with nothing. She had thrived,